in this strange pandemic times. I think health and our close family and friends are the first priority now. Now, I have been invited, and thank you very much for the invitation, to speak a bit about technology, education, the future of education, and what really should we be focusing on. And clearly, the last few months have been extremely unusual. I think worldwide, including in India, including in America, most universities have been forced to move the teaching online. And students have been forced to adapt to learning online. Now, this kind of a mass transition to digital online means is something that most faculty members or most university educators would have probably thought was impossible. And so in many ways, we have seen an acceleration of digital adoption in education and also in other sectors. Some people say that what should have normally taken 5 years happened in 3 months. I would think for education, moving to completely online would have probably taken 10, 20, 30 years. So we have seen a dramatic change. Now, having said this, there are positive sides and at the same time, some opportunities and questions. On the positive side, I think on the whole, the transition has happened quite smoothly. And I think, we should be quite proud as faculty and as students and as, staff members in universities to have successfully led this transition. So we have been able to handle change, and that is a positive thing. Now, at the same time, what is the more important question is what happens in the future? What happens after the COVID crisis recedes, after there's a vaccine, after, let's say, the current pandemic goes away? It might be 1 year, it might be less, but at some point it will become less important in our lives. So what happens then? What is the phase of education then? And I think that's the big question that we should be focused on, is in terms of trying to say, how do we ensure that we are able to leverage all the opportunities that technology provides to be able to build for the future? If you think about education models today, we have made some basic assumptions about how education is to be structured and delivered and organized. One key assumption has been same time, same place. So the bulk of education really relies upon faculty, students congregating in one location, and essentially some kind of a magic happening in the classroom where the teacher teaches or at least interacts with the students. Now, to support this one time, same place model, universities have also invested tremendously in building up their faculty bodies, because you need the faculty to be there on campus, and also in building very important big campuses. Capital investments in buildings is a very big part of every university's budget. Now the question arises, in the future, do faculty have to be there on campus? Do we need all those big buildings? And the answer is not clear. Clearly, there are lots of benefits of students coming together, of interacting, of learning from each other. But do we actually need the whole infrastructure that we have come to take for granted? Now, I can refer to some research done by a late Harvard colleague, Clayton, who wrote this very nice book called The Innovator's Dilemma back in the mid-90s, just at the start of the internet revolution. And his basic finding, which was quite shocking at that moment, today less shocking so, was that when an industry faces a disruption, a technology disruption, in almost all cases, the leader in the next generation of technology is rarely the leader in the current generation of technology. What does this mean for universities? It means that most likely, if Clayton is right, and his work has proven right in many areas, it's quite possible that the next generation leaders in education may not be the ones that we see today as leaders in education. why does this phenomena actually happen? So let's try and look at Clayton's work in a little bit more depth, just very briefly. So what Clayton found, he studied the disk drive industry. In the disk drive industry, the very clear sort of generations of disk technology. So there's a 5-inch disk, there's a 3-inch disk, the 1-inch disk, and so on. And what he found was that the leader in a certain generation of disk technology rarely became the leader in the next generation. Why does this phenomena actually happen? So let's assume you're the leader in today's technology, the 5-inch disk. Let's take an example. Now, somewhere, someone is discovering the next generation 3-inch. It could very well be a group in your own organization. Sometimes the leading organization has a small team tinkering with the next generation technology. Sometimes it is a small firm outside. In the case of education, it's very well could be e-learning. So yes, we have big major universities around the world, all focused on the current technology, which is same time, same place. And there is someone somewhere experimenting with e-learning. This would be very similar to what happened in education, let's say 20 years ago, when e-learning was very nascent and small e-learning companies were in fact trying out e-learning models. Now, what Clayton research found was that the current leader in the current generation technology keeps progressing, looks at the new entrants or the small new generation technology companies and says, well, they're too small. My customer still wants my technology. My technology is the one that the customers appreciate. It is the one that actually gets me more revenues. So I will keep on investing in my current technology. So the leader keeps on investing in the current technology, similar to universities keeping on investing in buildings and current same time, same place, teaching models, education models. In parallel, the small startups and new entrants, the e-learning companies, education, keep on developing, keep on growing, and they keep making progress. At some point, the big leaders, current leaders in current technology, look at these new companies and they say, well, look, they've actually grown. They have more customers than what they had 5 years ago. Should I? And that's where the key point comes in. At that point, the leader has to decide, should I invest in the new technology or should I keep on investing in the current technology? And that is why Clayton Christensen called it the dilemma, the innovator's dilemma. You are leading in the current technology. Should you actually make a big jump and shift to the new technology? It's like universities today. Should we actually make a big jump to e-learning technology-based education means? And what Clayton's research found was that most leaders choose deliberately, after careful thought, to stick to the current technology. And that's where the problem arises. The leader continues to stick with the current technology. The new entrants keep on growing. And at some point, and this point is very difficult to decide to sort of predict, at some point, the customers shift. So the customers of the current technology decide that, well, the new technology, which was nascent, not that well developed 10 years ago, 5 years ago, today is good enough for me, and I will shift. And when the customer shifts and moves from the current technology to the new technology, the current leader is left high and dry. It's too late for the current leader to invest in new technology. So basically, what happens then is leadership passes on to the new entrants, new companies. Now, this is the scenario that may very well play out in education. Education, we have very established big brand names worldwide doing the traditional technology model education. Now, today, we are at a tipping point at which e-learning models have proven to be viable. This mass adoption in COVID environment is a global test of how e-learning actually has worked. Some ways good, some ways not so good, but it has in general, as I said at the start, worked. Now the big question, this is the innovator dilemma by Clayton Christensen, is for university leaders is, what do we do? Do we keep on hoping that we go back to the previous model once COVID goes, we go back to what we know? Or do we make a big shift and fundamentally move to the new technologies? If Clayton is right, the current leaders in education will not make the big move to e-learning, technology-based means. And at some point in 10 years' time, perhaps, the current customers of traditional universities will shift large numbers to the new e-learning models. And that's when the leadership shifts. See, keep in mind, this does not mean that the traditional leaders will no longer survive. It is quite possible that the traditional leaders will survive or they might get acquired. But the important thing is who leads the industry, which is the organization that defines the rules of the industry. And the leadership basically shifts to the new generation leader. So the real question before us in education is who will define the rules of education or at least shape the industry in a very strong manner in the future, in 10 years, 15 years from now? Will it be the big brand today's universities, or will it be the new emerging technology-based companies? Will it be perhaps some current big brand university that moves deliberately to the new generation? These are all very open questions, and I think I just wanted to pose them to educators, leaders around the world, because this has very important implications for everyone. So that's really, in a sense, what I wanted to share with you. And I'll be very happy to take some questions. I see in the chat that there are 2 questions, so I'll try and answer them very briefly. So the first question is, with this new age of online and offline content, where does one draw the line on capturing useful courses or skills? I think this is where, the challenge is to understand what kind of skills are required for success in the current world. The world has changed dramatically, and the world is changing extremely fast, driven often by technology, but also by other global concerns. And the challenge for universities is to be able to change the content of what they teach. Challenge professors is to change the content of the courses fast enough. And I think this is a process that we have to engage. Some of this will happen online, some of this will happen offline. And the boundary drawing is there's no clear answer for it in my view. In some courses you will have more of, let's say, online, some more of offline. But I think that's a choice that we have to make. But the most important thing is we have to experiment to find what kind of boundaries work in which situations. Another question is, what are the main effects of recent developments, technology, education, learning? I think I outlined some of them. The most important question is, who will be the leaders in education tomorrow? Will it be the current leaders or will it be new leaders? How will education learning shape up in the future? How will, in fact, customer expectation, student expectation change education learning in the future? So lots of very important questions, and I think the impacts are going to be tremendous in multiple dimensions of education. The third question, the last question I'll take is, considering the digital divide in India, do you think new education models would work? This is a very important question, because even in today's day and world, technology is not inclusive. Today, I don't know how many of you know this, but about 45% of the world does not have access to the internet. 45% of the world. So when you talk about digital, it's important to keep in mind that it is not at all inclusive. Even if you take a richest, let's say city like Manhattan, there are huge differences in bandwidth between the bandwidth available in Wall Street or downtown Manhattan, and let's say in the upper areas of the city in the less wealthy areas. And even in America, which is one of the richest countries in the world, in the time of the confinement, I saw some data which showed that 22% of American households did not have access to the internet. 22%. So how can you do education in that situation? So this is a very important challenge. And I think we'll have to balance this challenge of being able to keep on investing in technology-based education, while at the same time making sure everyone else comes up the technology curve, because coming up on the technology curve is important not just for education, but for everything else, because the world is moving digital, the world is moving online in many ways. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the conference.
Thank you so much, Professor Dutta, for this address. It was truly an amazing experience here you speak. Another thanks to our knowledge partners, Red Seal. Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.